Try telling someone that they have a feminine side. Try telling them that they have a masculine side. For some people, that is all it takes. The temperature rises, the shields come up. You'll hear it in the voice first, tight, dismissive, a little edge of panic disguised as sarcasm. I'm not feminine. I'm not masculine. I don't do that gender stuff. I'm just myself, okay? But what are we protecting ourselves against here? What's behind the fear? This is the topic of today's episode of the Higher Self Dialogues with me, your host, Anton Jarrett. Just mention the masculine side or the feminine side to some people for whom this is their opposite sex, and the fear, the negative reactivity rises up quickly. A quick defensiveness emerges in the expression of, I don't have a masculine side. I don't have a feminine side. I'm not feminine. I'm not masculine. It's not just a reaction against being misunderstood or judged or misrepresented. What's at play here is something deeper, and that's an existential fear of dissolving, of losing ourselves or what we think is ourselves. Because here's the paradox: engaging with the so-called masculine or feminine side doesn't delete us. It reveals us, more of us. The fear isn't actually a fear of losing ourselves. It's simply a fear that arises from the possibility of losing a cherished idea, an idea we're so deeply attached to that we think it is us, but it's one we've created. These ideas of masculine and feminine, they're not the divine masculine and feminine that's the subject of today's episode. They are related. They are, if you like, species, forms of the divine masculine and feminine, but these forms are found everywhere in nature and the universe, in every kind of polarity and contrast. It's the underlying force behind the contrast that's the divine masculine and feminine that creates the contrast in the first place. Masculine and feminine, male and female, are in reality, deep reality, just two important but still minor forms of this principle at play. When we reject the forms we all know about, forms of masculinity and femininity in society and culture, we are rejecting the underlying divine essence that creates them, the essence in ourselves, which we, as higher selves, are trying to integrate. This integration is transformational, evolutionary, but it's about integration of and not identification with. It's okay to identify the forms of divine masculine and feminine in ourselves, in others, but to transform our consciousness and being, well, we need to go beyond that first step and integrate the underlying presence in our being that we've been ignoring, shunning, rejecting, and seeing as a threat from outside. Today, the hidden masculine and feminine within us are being recognized as a threat by more and more people, by individuals bent on creating and perpetuating culture wars, by institutions and states who are struggling to understand the deeper nature of reality and being. But the deeper essence of masculine and feminine is spiritual in nature and is a part of nature, like light and dark, hot and cold, contraction and expansion. When we, through fear, focus on the masculine and feminine as a binary, as a polar reality, that must be two things distinct, we prevent our own integration and the transformation that is based on it, including the transformation of the world and society that we're all suffering from and continually frustrated from. To integrate the divine masculine and feminine that exists in all of us, in all living things, and in the heart of all natural phenomena, it doesn't mean to identify with the opposite in us. So, if I'm a man or identify as being a man, integration doesn't mean identifying with the feminine. It can do, and that's some people's journey of integration, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in ourselves, it can also occur by simply including, acknowledging, accepting within, even if we don't express it in this way or that. But even this sounds scary to many people, though it doesn't have to be. It can really be just very simple. It's about becoming okay and comfortable with the opposing characteristics of our own personalities, for example. That's just one form of it. We might typically associate masculinity with strength, forcefulness, anger, firmness. We might say that these are forms of the divine masculine on one side of the spectrum. Well, the other side of the spectrum doesn't have to be so scary, but for many, the call to be soft, surrendering, accepting, forgiving feels like loss, feels like a threat to sovereignty. It doesn't feel familiar, and it feels like weakness, something to resist, to fight against, to mock and shame in others as a sign of degeneration. But it doesn't mean turning into someone who is then to be soft, accepting, forgiving exclusively. Integration means bringing these into your vocabulary, not losing, but adding to the toolkit of your expression. Now you can be both angry, strong, and firm, as well as soft, accepting, and forgiving. And in many ways, you are stronger and more powerful than you were before because you have a greater range of being available to you. So the fear is debunked and seen as foolish, really, self-defeating. I mean, the champions of hypermasculinity or hyperfemininity are championing a lopsided form of being, not an evolution, but a devolution, the cleaving and shutting off of a whole side of self that is trying to break through, that would allow them to be their fuller, higher selves, which is ironic because it seems the ultimate goals of these champions seems to be some kind of realization of a higher, purer form of being. Integration isn't about loss. It's about gain, about growth, and about opening up. But many are too afraid to even look, let alone do the work. So the next time you hear some kind of objection to the feminine or masculine, in addition to thinking about who is objecting, think about this. What is the fear speaking to? And what is still not integrated? Thank you for listening. That's all for this week's episode. This is the Higher Self Dialogues. I will see you in the next episode, but for now, goodbye.